Welcome to Season 4 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sara F. Hathaway, blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sara F. Hathaway.
Guys, welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. This is episode number 149, Season 4, episode 25. Happy to have you back with me today. We had to miss last week due to a family emergency. So I really hemmed and hawed with myself over how much of my personal life and what's kind of going on in my life that I should share on the air with the world. It's kind of a, it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult time to get through, and I'm not usually one who shares too much personal information like that. So I really hemmed and hawed with myself. But you know what? In the end, I decided that I really do want to share some things with the audience. So first of all, let me tell you what happened. My father-in-law, T.R. Hathaway, passed away. And T.R. was a superman, and he loved his family a lot. And we are going to miss him a whole bunch. We'd much rather been going down to Texas to visit for Christmas time rather than for the reasons we had to go down there. So TR was on the show. He actually was on episode 32 of the Changing Earth podcast. So it's just awesome that he got to be on the show and share that time with us. I don't know if it's episode 32 during the season. Let me check that out for you actually real quick so I can give you the scoop on that. He was on episode 113, Season 3, episode 32. That sounded a little bit off to me as soon as I said it. So anyway, TR was just this fantastic guy. Loved his family so much. And, we didn't realize how blessed we really were to have him in our life. So beyond the absolute heartbreak of losing, my husband's father, there just created a lot of stress, a lot of things that we didn't realize were going on, and we kind of got them opened up in our face, and then, worrying about my mother-in-law being separated from us. It's just very difficult things for us to go through, and I know lots of people have gone through it as well, but, it's kind of different when you're in the moment. So we have the stress that's going on. We also have a lot of financial issues that are going on. Things just weren't the way they were. So I decided to share this with you guys because I cannot tell you how thankful I am that I have been prepping along the way. I have, been just trying to rapidly pay down my credit cards and really make every penny count when we had the extra pennies, putting it into extra food and supplies and things like that. So now we have this, personal disaster where our world's going to get, rapidly shredded, basically. And, we have those fallback things to fall back on. We have those things taken off our mind. We know we can eat. I mean, if you can't eat in my house, then you're a moron, because I have food stocked, all over the place. So there's those things that we kind of took care of and we were preparing for ahead of time, and having that in place before, these moments of severe loss and change and things like that happen. Just take that one more thing off your mind. So I really wanted to share that with you today. Once again, like I say, he was on episode 113. You can go back and have a listen. And honestly, my husband hasn't been able to do it yet. But that's one of the cool things also about doing what I do, is I have a lot of legacy audio that, if God forbid something were to happen to me, my family can look back on and things like that. So definitely a cool little aspect of what I do, and I forever have his conversation captured, and I have things that I didn't share on the air captured, so that's pretty neat, and definitely a cool thing to have to share with everybody. However, right now, I cannot tell you how much your contribution to the podcast is needed and welcome addition to keep the show running. So if you head on over to www.patreon.com/changingearth, you'll find all the goodies that I have over there. in exchange for your contribution to the show. And if you have any suggestions, please go ahead and share them. There's a couple things I was thinking about putting together that would be great collector's items that go along with my books and stuff like that I've never put into books. So working on some of that. I also have the second part of the Las Vegas years just about ready to come out. It's got to go to the editor, but it's very small, so it shouldn't take too long. And while I was in Texas, if there's a bonus that came out of all this loss, this unexpected loss, I got a lot of book 5 done. So I'm super stoked about that. Obviously, I don't have a name. I don't usually pick a name till I'm a lot farther in. But I got a ton of work done on that, so we can be looking forward to those things coming out. So please, keep the show running. Give me your support at www.patreon.com/Changing Earth. Really, really appreciate it. So let's talk about the podcast. Last week not last week, but our last show that was on, I can't believe I missed a week. It's not very like me. I try to stay very disciplined, but, things happen sometimes. So we're just rolling with the punches. We got to adapt and overcome. So last podcast that came out, I left you guys totally hanging because Erica was taken prisoner by the federal governing board, by the feds, basically. And Corrine Tillman came down to see her, and she is the head of the Western FEMA division, and, had some words with her and things like that. So definitely a cool part of the story, one of my action sequences that I really love. I don't know, I guess I have fun putting my heroine in danger and seeing what becomes of that. So this week, we're going to catch up with First Sergeant Bennett as he rolls into Albuquerque looking for Erica. And, he finds out what's going on. So gathering proper intelligence information at that point is absolutely essential. So today I have James Razzone on, and he's back on the show with us today to talk to us about interrogation methods and things that you can employ in an SHTF situation or in your everyday life to gather information from people seeking it from you, or, you getting it from them, back and forth, right? How to handle that when somebody's asking you questions, how to navigate those waters. Very interesting stuff. So stick around for the interview with James Razzone later on. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and thank our sponsor. It is the Owl Emergency Opener, and I cannot say enough great things about this product. And every time you go out and purchase one of these every time you go out and pick up one of these Owl Emergency Openers, it helps the podcast out. It's another way that I'm getting a little bit of income for all the work that I put into the podcast. And let me tell you, like I said, I'm going to need your contributions and your assistance, or else I just don't know where the future of the podcast is going right now. So, definitely traumatic times, a little bit of turmoil, a little bit of heartbreak, but we're going to, put our best foot forward. I've just kept training, kept my head up, and we're just going to keep going. So let's go ahead and hear from Owl Opener, and then we'll get into Chapter 25 of Battle for the South.
Trapped in your own car, how are you going to get out alive? The only way out: break the glass. This credit card-sized device shatters the glass with the snap of your finger. Owl uses a carbide tip and the resonant frequency of the glass itself. Your strength is irrelevant. Owl has a recessed razor blade that slices through jammed seatbelts instantly and comes with a holder that adheres to your visor. OwlOpen.com. Proudly made in the USA. Order now while supplies last.
Chapter 25. The dust flew as Bennett pulled his truck into Albuquerque, New Mexico. He had heard that the militiamen were gathering there, and they would send a contingent to meet the Mercs to take back Vegas. Bennett knew Vince and Erica would be with this group. "This is Albuquerque, right?" Dexter yelled from the back of the truck through the little sliding window. "Sure is," Bennett replied. They pulled up to a complex of militia buildings where they were met by a soldier asking his business. "You want to talk with Cassidy," the soldier informed him, telling him where to find her. They parked the Jeep and Corporal Smith jumped out of the back with Dexter and Trucker. "Man, what do you feed that dog? His butt stinks," Smith commented. "Only the best for my trucker," Dexter said, petting the animal. Bennett headed for the building, ordering the men to stay put for now. He ascended 3 flights of stairs where he met another soldier and was ushered in to see Cassidy. "Master Sergeant Bennett," Cassidy welcomed him as he entered. "How are you doing, Cassidy?" Bennett responded, pointing to his recently updated rank patch. "I'm doing well. Got promoted, did you?" "What is that now, first sergeant?" Cassidy replied. "Yes, ma'am," he said proudly. Eli approached and greeted him warmly as well, shaking his hand. Bennett had been instrumental in freeing Cassidy from the federal forces when Bennett worked for the federal government at the Las Vegas camp. He had used a rebellion to get Cassidy and the Moors out on the same night. Eli had always been curious why Bennett had left his strategic position in the federal forces to support the Moors. But now, after meeting them, he fully understood. "To what do we owe the honor of your arrival?" Cassidy asked. "I'm looking for Vince and Erica Moore," he informed her. "So are we," Cassidy commented. Bennett looked at her confused. "I thought they were with you," Bennett asked. They were. They were instrumental in taking the Western Wall and headed up here in yesterday's convoy. But no one has seen them," Cassidy explained. Just then, a dirtball of a man was ushered into the room by Philip. Eli recognized him as the young man that had been traveling with Vince and Erica. They gave Kyle some water and listened to his story about Vince and Erica going to the bar, following them out to the estate, and then running out of gas on the way home. He had walked all night to get help, but the road was empty and the miles long. Cassidy knew from Kyle's description that they had been taken to the Green Estate. It was a very large ranch located in northern New Mexico, almost to the Colorado border. "It will be heavily guarded," Eli warned. "They'll be transported to the capital. We need to get scouts over there now," Bennett insisted, worrying that they may have already been moved. Cassidy gave instructions to Philip, who left to go get a team assembled and on the move. As Kyle recovered, Bennett picked his brain for any more information he had. He told Bennett about the match that Cassidy and Erica had and how it had healed the wounds of the past. It concerned Bennett even more, knowing that Erica was already injured before she was captured. He left in a fury to go tell Dexter and his men they would head out to rescue them tonight. Leaving the building, he was startled by the noise of jets flying by high in the sky. They were moving from west to east. The jets required a lot of fuel, and there had to be a good reason to have them in the air. Bennett doubted that Colonel Henderson, the leader of FEMA, would waste fuel to take out refugees in an unhospitable area that was in peril of destruction anyway. They're moving them before the next quake comes, Bennett thought. "What did she say?" Dexter wondered as Bennett approached. "Sir," Bennett replied, noting the young man was growing away from his training. "What?" Dexter didn't understand. "What did she say, sir?" Bennett repeated. Dexter caught his point and replied, "What did she say, sir?" "Your parents have been taken to a large estate north of here. They're being held by the federal forces," Bennett informed him. "What? Oh man, we were so close. When are we headed out?" Dexter asked, adding the sir as Bennett scowled at him. "Tonight. There's a team heading there now. We're going to get some chow and head out after them. They can relay intel as we travel. The guy they were traveling with, Kyle, says he has their gear. Let's get their thermal cloaks before we go," Bennett instructed him. "Got it," Dexter replied, heading off to find Kyle. Bennett left with Smith and Jensen to fill their bellies. It had been an arduous trip out to New Mexico, and now the night would be a long one as well. When they finished their meal, Bennett sent Jensen out to procure silencers for their 9mm pistols. The silencers wouldn't muffle the flash, but at least they would have a quieter fallback weapon if all else failed. Dexter returned. He had the cloaks and grabbed some food for himself and Trucker. The sun was setting in the west as they headed north, constantly receiving intel from the scout group as they drove. Vince and Erica were still on site, judging from the increased security. It was decided that they were being kept in a barn on the far end of the property. To avoid detection, Bennett drove around on a back road and parked the Jeep a good distance from the estate. He and Dexter would walk to the estate with the extra cloak. Trucker could not hide from the thermal cameras and had to wait as backup with Smith and Jensen. He softly whined as Dexter left with Bennett. They approached the fence and quietly snipped a hole big enough for them to enter through. They quickly moved from cover to cover, avoiding the federal guards. They approached the back of the barn. Bennett slipped up behind the guard, swiftly snapping the man's neck. Dexter slowly crept inside, making sure it was all clear. There was a guard approaching, and Dexter slid a knife out of its sheath. He threw it from the concealment of his dark corner. The knife flew silently through the air, but spun one too many times. The handle struck the man hard in his forehead. Then it bounced and stuck in his foot. "Ow! What the man started to say as he was mobbed by Bennett. A knife slammed down the front of his throat, silencing his curiosity. Bennett scowled at Dexter, and Dexter shrugged back at him. Dex collected his knife from the man's foot as he dragged the guy into the shadowed corner with the other guard Bennett had killed. Creeping along the stalls, trying to stay low, they peeked into each one until they saw Erica's body. They watched carefully to see if she was still breathing. Her chest slowly went up and down. They exhaled deeply with relief. Bennett waited, watching her, while Dexter continued down the row looking for Vince. Bennett watched Dexter signal with his hand as he found Vince in a stall further down the line. Bennett indicated for Dexter to put the cloak on him and bring him back. Then he slowly and quietly tried to open the stall, but the metal creaked horribly. The noise woke Erica, and she cowered in the corner with her ears covered. Bennett couldn't see her face, but there was blood on her shirt. "Erica, it's okay," Bennett told her. "I've come to get you." "Sergeant Bennett?" Erica said in a daze. When she had first met him, he was a sergeant, and she often called him Sergeant affectionately. "Is that really you?" "Yes, Erica, it's me," he replied gently. "No, it's a dream," she yelled back. "Shh, Erica, I've come to get you out of here," he tried to explain softly. "I don't want to go with you. You lied to me," she yelled, stumbling about. "Shut up, Erica, you'll alert the guards," he commanded sternly. But she didn't stop. The fuzz in her brain was thick, and she was having a hard time gripping reality. Bennett couldn't risk her alerting the guards and launched across the stall. Holding his hand over her mouth, he was kicked repeatedly by her flailing legs. "Damn, woman! Even rescuing you is a challenge," Bennett cursed under his breath. She became exhausted from her efforts and slowly relaxed in his massive arms. He tucked her into the cloak that he wore and met Dexter in the hallway. Dexter's cloaked father rested over his shoulder. As they were leaving, a guard approached down the hall. Bennett shot him twice with the silenced pistol, but it was heard, and the alarm was raised. They hustled out the back of the barn and moved Vince and Erica as fast as they could across the yard. The thermal cloak shadowed them in the darkness until one soldier shouted, "Look for their feet!" Shots rang out through the night as they zigzagged their way towards the exit in the fence. The Federal Forces soldiers advanced, but were suddenly dropping from militia sniper fire and had to fall back to cover to avoid the barrage. Dexter pulled his father through the hole with Bennett's help, and then Bennett carried Erica through. Smith and Jensen provided cover fire as they approached and sped away in a cloud of dust. The Federal Forces soldiers gave chase, but Bennett's Jeep was being covered by the militia scout truck that sported a .50 caliber machine gun. The Federal vehicles were left smoking on the side of the road. All right, definitely an exciting part of the story as Bennett and Dex peel out of the drive down the road with Vince and Erica in tow. And like I said in the intro, I really love writing these kind of sequences. It's just my favorite part of the book. So that's what kind of gets you whipping through. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? So definitely my favorite part to not only write, but also read. And it's really exciting stuff. As I mentioned in the intro, proper information collection can be the difference between a mission's success and utter failure. So here to talk to us today about interrogation methods is James Razzone. James is the author of the Red Storm series, World War III series, Interview with a Terrorist, and Dinner with a Terrorist. He's an Amazon best-selling author. He started his military career in the Army National Guard as a communications specialist and forward observer for a self-propelled artillery unit. He later joined the U.S. Air Force, becoming an interrogator during the 2007 Iraq War troop surge. After 10 years of service in the armed forces, James spent several additional years in Iraq as a contractor for the Department of Defense and the Department of State. During all of this time in the sandbox, books and writing became an escape. Later, James worked as a military advisor in the area of identity intelligence for the U.S. Central Command during General David Petraeus' leadership and U.S. European Command under Admiral James Stavridis and General Philip Breedlove. The experience led him to travel and work in countries all across the globe, giving him a unique global perspective. During this time, he also completed a Master of Science degree
at the University of Oxford. You can find out all about James and all the great work he does at author-james-razone.com. That's author-james-razone.com. Razone is spelled Rosone. So let's go ahead and welcome James to the show. Today, I am back with James Razone. James, thank you so much for joining me again on the Changing Earth podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem. It's great to be back with you guys.
Well, it's always good to have you. I really enjoyed our first interview, and I'm excited for the second one. Today, First Sergeant Bennett now, he got a promotion since our last interview, and he arrives in Albuquerque. He's looking for my main character, Erica, and when he finds Erica, she's still feeling the effects of some of the interrogation tactics that were employed upon her. So we are talking interrogation today. So why don't you, I know you got a couple of, or you've got a great book that's really right on this genre. So why don't you go ahead and just remind everybody who you are, where they can find you, and talk a little bit about that book.
Sure. So again, my name is James Razone, and one of the unique jobs I had when I was in the Air Force was working as a human intelligence collector, which is a kinder, gentler way of saying we were interrogators. We did 6.5 months of joint training with the Army on interrogations and learning how to acquire information from some pretty hostile individuals who frankly don't want to talk with you. Mm-hmm. And so that's really a lot of, it's a little bit of my background. I've got a little over 2,000 hours worth of experience interrogating Al-Qaeda prisoners. A number of my former prisoners have escaped and are now in the leadership ranks of the ISIS organization. So it's kind of interesting to see how they've evolved and how really small knit that community is, so to speak, and that a lot of the bad actors really don't shift too far away from each other. It's kind of like a criminal organization, you know. Once a drug dealer, kind of always a drug dealer, so to speak.
Yeah, so they just keep running in the same circles. It's not like they escaped and went underground or anything. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's not like they had some coming to Jesus, thing here where they decided to, well, it's me, I'll change my ways, you know.
Right. Yeah. So when we say the word interrogation, it probably conjures up some interesting images in most of our brains. So can you talk to us about interrogation and what that process is all about?
Sure, and there's many different types of interrogations. There's interrogations that the police will conduct or law enforcement will conduct, all the way down to what we conducted, which is the military interrogations of enemy combatants and Al-Qaeda members. So a lot of interrogation ultimately comes down to conversations. It's just sitting and talking with people. It's knowing how to ask the right types of questions. It's knowing how to read the responses that you're getting, both the facial expressions people are giving you, the tone of their voices, the demeanor, and the response in what it is they're saying. And then be able to make a judgment call as to whether or not you believe the information to be truthful and accurate, or if there are signs or tells that are saying that this is not accurate information that's being fed to you. So at the end of the day, interrogation is an interview. It can be aggressive or it can be passive. But that's really what an interrogation ultimately is an interview.
Yeah, that's why I thought it would be so great to talk about, because it could be as easy as, just having that conversation with somebody. Do you trust what they're saying or not? I mean, learning how to read people is great because, in our other interview, we talked about trusting in politicians and things like that. And they've done some really interesting programs on like reading body language of politicians and stuff like that, and how to tell, like Bill Clinton when he was, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, yeah. Right? And so they were going through all of his body language and things like that. And it's really interesting stuff.
It is, but even so, you got to be a little cautious though when people, the study of the body language is kinesis, and a lot of times people are, oh, I'm a kinesis expert. I can tell when people are lying to me, and that's not always true. I can give you a case in point. We had one of our instructors was telling us about the time when he was overseeing an interrogation unit in Baghdad right after the fall of Saddam, and they had an informant come up to them and tell them he knew the location where Saddam's sons were hiding, and they were actually hiding at his house. And they were trying to ascertain if this guy's information was truthful. Well, everything this guy told them, their liars are saying he's lying. And so they would polygraph the guy. He would lie about everything. But when they would ask him, is Saddam's son staying with him, he would pop as true. He would show as truthful. So he's a pathological liar, but in this one particular area, he is telling us the truth. And I was marveled at that until I got to Iraq and experienced that myself several times with a couple of prisoners as well, who were just pathological liars. But in certain areas, they were very, very truthful. And it's really kind of challenging because you can't always judge by body language. There are so many other variables and things you have to take into consideration.
Right. Yeah. Like how, and especially like if they've learned anything about it themselves, then they can learn how to control those things and give you different tells as well.
Well, and some people are just naturally shady people or shifty and kind of dishonest people. But that doesn't mean that they're lying about everything. It just means that their demeanor comes across that way. And it just can be a product of where they grew up, the product of the environment. I mean, if you grew up under the regime of Saddam Hussein, chances are you're going to be rather deceptive most of the time. It's not because you're a born liar and lie about everything, but because the environment requires you to be deceptive. It required you to hide emotions. It required you to not always be forthright with information when questioned about something.
That's true. There's that cultural reference again, right?
Again, yep, all about the cultural reference of where you're at, what it is you're doing.
Yeah, what do they do? So why is interrogation a good technique for us to be familiar with in our daily lives? Why would you suggest that somebody who's interested in it, study a little bit more on interrogation?
Well, in reality, you use the tactics and techniques that we learn, you use them on a daily basis. Whether you're at work and you work in sales or you work in management, you're going to interact with people. And you're going to be running approaches, whether it's trying to convince someone to buy a particular product or software or service, or you have obstinate employees or individuals that you're responsible for supervising. It all comes down to human interaction and be able to understand human behavior and traits, and how can you best interpret that and then either, sounds bad, but manipulate it for your end state, for your goal, whether it's to make that sale or whether it's to make your office operate more efficiently and people be more responsive to what it is you're trying to convince them to do or to say or to act.
Yeah, or just, better production, just make them happier maybe. Maybe they're down in the dumperoos and there's a way you can get inside and help them pull out of that. So it could be a very positive things too, as far as the, negative manipulation, right?
Well, how many times have you, greeted someone and say, hey, how are you doing? And natural response is, oh, we're doing great. How many times have you actually said, well, hey, how are you really doing?
Yeah.
It's being able to perceive that they're not all right.
Yep.
And it's being able to pry back that onion a little bit further and see what else is going on.
Yeah. And that's for sure, especially with like close friends, as soon as you pick up the phone or see them, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing all right. Oh, what's really going on? Right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Really helpful, especially when you have kids.
Yes, especially one who doesn't like to do homework, but tells you that it's all good and it's all taken care of. He's really good at deception, actually.
Kids are naturals.
What are some situations in an
SHTF situation, post-collapse situation, where knowing how to get information that you're seeking from people is going to be essential. So some of the, just some of the scenarios you can think of where this would really come in handy.
Oh, sure. When everything collapses around you, one of the biggest commodities, aside from, ammunition, food, water, medical stuff, is going to be information. Knowing what's going on around you, how are you going to be able to react to it, and what's going to naturally happen in a situation like that is rumors are going to spread, and they're going to be rather rampant. And they kind of take on a life of their own, and they evolve kind of like the game telephone is played. And that's just how the rumor mill works. So knowing how to ask pointed questions, how to ask direct questions, how to ask closed-ended questions, and being able to find out essential information that's really going to determine a fight or flight situation for you is really going to be important. Knowing what information you need to get out of someone. How are you going to get it out of them without being overly obvious, being bearing, overbearing on them, because then you can throw up defenses. When you're meeting in a new community, are they friend or foe? Well, you don't know that right away, but you need to be able to ascertain that pretty quick to determine if this is going to be a trading partner or a potential adversary. And so if you don't understand some of those basic human concepts and how to ask the right types of questions and be able to discern answers properly, then you can be in for you're really ripe for being taken advantage of.
And for some reason, I always think about like so you have your little colony or whatever, and so you have like a pregnant female that comes up to your gate, or a child or something like that, and oh, I'm food hungry, I'm just out on my own kind of thing, and how do you trust that that's the truth and let them in to what's going on, or keep them out because you have to make an ethical decision at that point, so what are some of the things that you might ask if you're in this compound and you have this individual approach you?
I guess I probably want to ask some questions about, where are they originally from? How long have they been out on their own? What kind of led them to this position? How did they get to where they are now? How did you find out about us, or how did you find us? What drew you to coming to talk with us? What did you do prior to the event? Because identifying their past skills is going to be really important too. If they have specific skill sets, then they may be a very big added value to your group, even if they are going to be an initial drain on your resources. So identifying some of those types of information is going to be helpful, I think.
Is there any way to kind of like, check their truthfulness? Like, I don't know, where are you from? Maybe somebody in your group is from the same city or knows something about that. Like, you could do probing questions to just kind of develop a baseline of when they're telling the truth and when they're not, since you don't have a poly.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one way you would do it. Another way you do it is a technique we call circle questioning technique, where what you're doing is you're asking them, one money question, then 2 or 3 benign questions, then a money question, then 2 or 3 benign questions. So where are you from? Okay, you're from the city here. Great. What did you do before the situation happened? What happened here? What happened here? Then you go back, well, what did you do before it? Where are you from again? And you just continue to ask, and you go around and around in circles like that. Because by asking them 2 or 3 benign questions, then going back to a money question, then 2 or 3 benign questions, then back to a money question, you're getting them to have to think in a myriad of different avenues, different areas. Mm-hmm. And if the money questions don't start to match, continue to match and match and match, then they're creating a story, and they're just not able to keep it straight.
I like that. Are there any other of these techniques that you can share with us that, what kind of situation would we use them in?
Well, I mean, that's probably one of the most effective ones you're going to want to ask when you got someone who's approaching you that you don't know, and you're trying to ascertain if they're, friendly or not. Again, when you're like trying to meet another community and determine if they're going to be a trading partner or if they're going to be an adversary, comes down to just exchanging information. Do you have something that they should know about, and swapping information and seeing if they're feeding you the same information. So like if you know the answer to the question, they should give you the same answer.
Right.
That can kind of help build a little bit of trust and say, okay, well, at least we all have this common thing. We all seem to understand this. So now we can start building on further stuff. And then again, like if you're being interrogated, it really comes down to very quickly, in your case, identifying what specifically it is they're after. And so then you can either say, okay, this is what they want to know. Is it valuable and or is it or detrimental to me or my group if I give it up or not? If it's not valuable and it's not detrimental, then give it up, and give it up quickly and easily. There's no reason to cause further suspicion and cause them to want to probe further. Because if you have a weapon cache or a stash of food, they're not asking you anything about that. They're just asking you some benign question about, well, how many people are in your group? Well, make some number up. Make it realistic, but give them a false number. That's not a big deal. If they start to say, well, if you start lying about that, they're like, well, they're going to start prying more because they're going to know you're lying. They're going to say, okay, well, let's keep questioning this person, but now maybe let's introduce some new tools to the trade. Now your world just went from bad to really bad.
Yeah. So if it's not that important, like go ahead and just give the answer. Try to be, as truthful as possible. Try to remember, if you do give them a false number, you better remember that for the circle questioning, right?
Correct. That's why what you try to do is you try to make things as similar to reality as possible. So it's like if you're going to come up with a cover name, use a name that you already are familiar with using or can become very quickly familiar with using. You want to keep your cover story as close to the reality of your real story as possible, because it's significantly less likelihood of you slipping up and screwing up your cover.
Yeah, we don't want them to introduce new tools to find answers.
No, I mean, in an end of the world scenario, the tools are going to be pretty medieval because there's just not the technology that they would have available. If it was a modern day situation, then you probably have to be more concerned with them using pharmaceutical interrogations on you, which there's really no hope of being able to lie or work your way around that. The medicine and the drugs are just too effective.
They actually have like the super truth serum, like in True Lies and stuff like that.
Well, it's a similar variant. I can give you an example. I've had both of my hips replaced, and so a drug that the doctors will tend to give you when you're very apprehensive, they'll give you a drug called Ativan or some other similar derivative, and that drug will make you very not give a crap about anything that's going on in the world.
Okay.
They killed your dog. You'd just be laughing. Oh, that's great, whatever. It just makes you so much more less inhibited, and so you're going to talk. There's just very little way of being able to not talk. And then there's the flip side of, if this isn't going to work, well, then there are other drugs we can use that can start to cause all of your nerve endings to be on fire and feel like you're just in an inferno, and you're really not. But your brain thinks that it is, and so it's not fun. So there's different ways to make people talk. Not everything has to involve pain. Pleasure and euphoria feelings are probably way more effective because your defenses are down, you're feeling good, you can conquer the world, and you just don't care. That is the ideal state to get someone in, and then you just start draining them of all the information they've got.
So even, if you say somebody got
you trusted them enough to bring them through the gate and stuff. Even, having them indulge in more alcohol, you make it look like you're drinking alcohol along with them or whatever, and then get them good and drunk. They might be more open to talking with you and all this stuff, and then just spill their guts all over the place.
You can try that. You can do that. You can give them, narcotics so that you've got them, or like a painkiller. Crush up a Percocet and slip it in their drink. Things like that. There's just lots of little ways you can get someone to lose their inhibition or their guard and cause them to slip up. Again, you don't need to get them to give up the whole story. You just need them to invalidate the cover story they've given you to prove that they're not who they say they are.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And that's all you need to kick them out then.
I like that take too, that, because a lot of, when you think interrogation, you're thinking like this negative, like people being tortured for information and stuff. And that automatically puts people on defense and puts them up stronger. How strong is their willpower at that point, So now it's your willpower against their willpower. So I like that take on it of bringing their guard down and just, hey, what's going on,
My whole thing with the whole torture thing as an interrogator is it effective and can it work? Yes, but it only works in certain situations. Long-term interrogation, long-term debriefing like that, it's useless. Because the problem with it is it always puts a question mark as to whether or not they're telling you this because they want the pain to stop, or they're telling you this because this is legitimately the answer. You want them to want to give you the answer, or to unwittingly give you the answer. That's when you know you're going to get the truth and you're going to get the accurate information. Now, that approach, I will tell you, is very hard to master, and it is a very time-consuming approach. That's why I say torture, while it is not 100% effective, it does have its uses, like in a quick tactical environment. But again, it really comes down to what do you define as torture. I do not think, like, for instance, waterboarding is torture. You're not physically harming someone. You are psychologically making them think they're drowning, but physically you're not harming them. You're not breaking their bones. You're not pulling their fingernails out. You're not burning them. You're not scarring them. You're not physically hurting them. It is a psychological tool. And I'm all for psychological tools and mental things and pharmaceutical drug things like that, because I don't believe in physical torture. I don't think that is right when there are tools that frankly are significantly better.
That makes a lot of sense, because that's the whole thing. It was like, well, we don't want to be hurting people. No, nobody wants to be hurting people, but you got to get the answers. Much better to, like you say, kind of play with their mind instead of having to harm their body. And that was going to be one of my questions to you was, are there some types of techniques that do cause people to give up false confessions? Because you hear about, police interrogations where people just wanted to get out of the room. So they said, yeah, I did it, whatever.
Well, that's what a lot of people will do, because by and large, the vast majority of people are very impatient and weak-minded. And so they will sit you in a room for 12 hours or 16 hours and kind of wear you down a bit and get you to just agree to whatever, just to leave. And they'll lie to you that, well, all you need to do is just agree to this and we can let you go.
Right. And
that's not what's going to happen. But again, it's a very distinct difference between, like a law enforcement interrogation versus a military interrogation. When we interrogate terrorists, we're not trying to gain a confession. I really don't care if you did this or not.
Right.
All I care about is getting information to go capture or kill your buddies. I do not care whether you place the IED on the road. I only care so much as whether it will help lead me to find the people who gave you the bomb or the people who you are working with. So I can either capture or kill them. That's all I care about.
Right.
I'm not there to get a conviction. So the way I approached it and the way we were taught to approach it was distinctly different than how law enforcement approaches it, because
Fair
they're
enough.
there to try to get a conviction.
Yeah, you really don't care. You just need the next piece of info so you can go grab the next guy, basically.
Well, yeah, I'm moving up the food chain. I
Yep.
don't really care about you. I want to get the next guy above you, and then when I get him, I want the next guy above him, and then I want to continue to work my way up that food chain
That's got to
until
make your
eventually I hit
job
the
a
top.
little bit more difficult, though, because usually up the food chain is the people that are going to hurt them for giving up that information. So that's got to be tricky to get them to want to give you that information. You know,
Well, you would think that, but the problem is a lot of these guys are either coerced into doing what they're doing, and so
Okay.
it's like if you were told to place this IED on the side of the road or they would kill your family. Well, now you got captured. Do you want me to go find the people who threatened your family? Because I'm either going to capture or kill them. I don't care about convicting them. And
Right.
they're usually more than likely than wanting to give up those goods. It's when you get to the leaders who are the actual hardcore dedicated ones, that's when the true challenge gets into play, because then it's trying to get them to give up their organization, the people below them, and or the people above them. And a lot of times they'll be willing to trade one or the other, but not both. So that's kind of the hard part, is getting them to get both. Because sometimes they're like, all right, well, if you guys are willing to cut a deal with me, I'll give you my boss. Or if you're willing to cut a deal with me, I'll give you my 2 cells that are below me.
Right. But they won't go the whole thing.
Very rarely do you get them to go the whole thing. I mean, I've gotten a few of my guys to do that, but again, that's not it's not something you're always going to get. And part of it just comes down to time too, because when I was over there, we're doing 12 and 16 hours a day of interrogations. I have intel reports I have to read. I've got reports I've got to write. I've got summaries I've got to write. I've got to do the research for the next day's interrogations. And then I have to go and talk to my prisoners that I'm interrogating that day. So, I may do 3 or 4 interrogations in a day where I spend 8 hours in the booth questioning 4 guys. But then I've got another 8 hours worth of paperwork and research I've got to do to clean up today's work and then get ready for the next day's work. And in the process, I have to eat. You got to drink.
Right.
You try to get some time to go to the gym. You try to get some time to sleep. And oh, by the way, they're shooting rockets and mortars at you every freaking day.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun and like a mental break. I mean, because when you're just
There is no break.
in that,
You're
yeah,
stuck doing it.
that's
And
crazy.
these guys
Yeah.
are the worst of the worst. I mean, total muck. I mean, you get one day you're dealing with a guy who placed an IED, decided to road and killed a handful of Americans. The next day you're dealing with a dirt farmer who's, out there, hiding all the weapons for everyone, or another guy's a facilitator, moving people back and forth across the borders, or another one's a document forger or a money guy. The wide range of activity is just incredible, and trying to remember the different villages and organizations in your province that you're dealing with.
Who you're
You
interviewing
could be
this
dealing
time?
Yeah, I mean, you could be dealing with 4 different terrorist organizations in the same province,
Wow.
and dealing with all interrogating a guy from each of those 4 terrorist groups in the same day.
Right.
So it gets quite challenging.
Like, just keep those drugs coming.
It's ridiculous. And you're getting anywhere from 3 to 800 new prisoners a week, and there's only 56 interrogators to deal with it. I mean, that's a lot of
Wow.
people to have to sift through and figure out who's valuable, who do you keep, who do you kick to the curb, how much time do you spend with each person, and it's quite challenging.
And then come back into the States and deal with your kids and then go back out, right? Yeah.
How do you go from being Jack Bauer, on 24, living that life on a daily basis, to coming back to this is very, very hard.
I bet. Yeah, just complete change of pace, and then everybody's, oh, come on, don't you want to be happy-go-lucky? And yeah, I can imagine that as a mental challenge and a half.
I had one particular detainee where, he was the cell leader for creating these car bombs, and they were wearing baghead belts. He was a big H guy we were after. And we finally got a break and got a what his cell number was. And so we started putting that into the listening devices, the drones that are constantly flying over the city listening for phone calls. And we finally pinpoint where he's at. So now we know where he's at. So they sent a Delta Force team to go capture him. So they're videoing this. I'm watching the video. And they swoop in. Dude leans out of the helicopter, fires a couple rounds into the hood of this guy's car. The helicopter hovers nearby. They jump out of the helicopter, run over there, grab him, pull him out of the front seat, put a hood on him, a hoodie on his head, zip tie him. Helicopter lands in the middle of the intersection. They run over there, they throw him on, and they're off. And then 6 hours later, they're bringing him, sitting him in a chair in front of you and pulling the hoodie off. You're like, hello, Mohammed. It's good to meet you. I've been hearing a lot about you. And that's, how it works. You write the report, whoever he gives you, and they go hit that guy's house the next day, and you keep working up that chain like that. But it's hard to go from a job where you're literally doing that kind of stuff to coming home, and it's just nothing like that.
Yeah, there's no comparison. So what would you kind of advise listeners, like if they're interested in learning more about how they can become effective information gatherers, for preparation for an SHTF situation or just in their daily lives? Maybe they're dealing with teenage children as well. What would you kind of advise them? Where would you send them? Kind of thing. Would you send them someplace for info, honestly, or you got a tactic?
Well, not to gloat or anything, but honestly, I'd read the book that we wrote on it called Interview with a Terrorist. I basically wrote this as therapy when I got back from Iraq, was just to kind of decompress, was just walking you through what it was like in the training, what the different approaches were, how we worked it, and then my different cases and stuff. And I think that if you look at that and you study it, you'll be able to draw a lot of parallels to how you can use the same tactics and techniques in your everyday life, and how they can really work quite effectively. Because there's some of them, I go through what was an effective approach and what failed utterly. And so you can see how some of those different tactics work, how you prioritize information, why certain information is more valuable than other types of information. Mm-hmm. That really helped. I mean, if you're interested in learning a lot of that, then the best way to do it is to read firsthand accounts of people who've actually done that job, and I would encourage you to look at both civilian and military perspectives, because you're going to kind of want to have both perspectives to really understand that field really well.
Isn't it amazing how healing telling the story is, right? How healing, like creating fictional work, can just be so mentally soothing. I've done this episode before. It's incredible how much telling stories can help you heal.
For me, I think it has been a lot, because I have a hard time with PTSD, and some of the medication that the VA gives is really good. But the downside is it has a lot of negative side effects that make it very difficult to work full time. And what I have found is that writing really good fiction stories has been able to help me work around some of those impediments and still be able to make a good living and support my family and do that. So for me, writing has been a great way to help work around some of my own PTSD issues.
And I know when we did the first interview, I thanked you for your service, and you went, yep. But you know why I insist on thanking is because of reasons like this. I have a friend who is a former sheriff sergeant, and there's a lot that people don't understand. You think, oh, well, you're just doing that job, whatever. You don't leave jobs like that behind. You don't come home and it's over, new day, hang that up on the hook, and now I face my family life. It's a lot of baggage to carry. And that's why I think it's really important, because, I understand on a personal level how difficult it can be to live with those things. And that's why I mean it when I say thank you for your service. It's without people like you out there taking on those challenges, we would have been a much different situation.
Yeah, I mean, you hear and see things that just people shouldn't have to hear or see, but you have to do it for your job and to accomplish the mission. Because at the end of the day, our job was to help save American lives and innocent Iraqi lives, and to defeat these foreign terrorists that were absolutely wreaking havoc in their country. And if we didn't stop that and do that, then tens of thousands of more people were going to die. And at the end of the day, we just wanted to end the killing, and we just wanted to bring some sort of peace and stability to the country.
Right, right. Well, that's a great way to release it, is through your writing and stuff. Now, I'm understanding now why you're on such a mission to get so many books out. It's the calm after the storm, right?
Yeah, and as a writer, you have to approach it from either I'm going to do this as a pure artistic way in which you're just writing for the sake of writing, and there's plenty of people who do that.
Right.
Or you approach it as a business. And me and my wife, we approach it as a business. So we really study our market, we study our audience, and we look at our competition and we say, where is a gap and how can we fill it? And can we fill it better than anyone else? And that's what we try to strive and do. And, I think so far we've been pretty successful at it. We've only been writing now for 2 years and 2 months.
That's so impressive.
So,
that's
yeah,
so
we
crazy.
just got to keep
That's
plugging away. We
Yep.
have our 10th book coming out in
Wow.
next month. We'll have a total of 4 books this year, so that'll put us at 13 books in 3 years.
Wow. That is just incredible, I'm telling you. That is awesome.
But when
So
it's
why don't
your
you go
full-time
ahead?
job, that's what
Yeah,
you do.
right. Why don't you go ahead and remind everyone where they can find your books, where they can find you, and what's your latest project that you're working on?
The easiest way to find us is on Amazon.com. You just look up James Razone. We have a list of books that we've written, from Interview with the Terrorists all the way through to our current fictional military series we have, which is our Red Storm series, looking at the accidental war over Ukraine between NATO and Russia and how that spirals into Korea and Taiwan, as both China and Russia look to capitalize on the weakened position of the NATO alliance and the United States. I mean, you can't be everywhere at once. And if China and Russia ever decided to work together, that could cause some serious problems for the United States, because our military is not the size it used to be. And what a lot of people don't take into consideration is we've been at war for 16 years. We have fighter aircraft, we have cargo planes, we have refueling aircraft and ships and vehicles that have been in continuous combat for 16 years. That stuff needs to be replaced. It needs to be fixed. And we're probably at our most vulnerable point right now because so much of our equipment is not combat ready, simply because it's just worn out. And through the last 6 years of sequestration, there hasn't been the freedom within the DoD to purchase replacement parts and replacement equipment. And that's really going to bite us in the rear if one of our adversaries were ever to take us on at this precise moment. We would be in a hard place to be able to respond back to that.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was watching, I watched that series on history, The Long Road Home, and they're out in the transport, and their engine just breaks down in the middle of this mission, and it's like, what? How could the engine possibly blow up in the middle of your mission? Why wasn't anybody on that? And so that's definitely what I thought about, is why would that happen, right? But that makes a lot of sense that all this gear has been in continual motion for the last 16 years. So of course the engine's going to wear out. It's in the desert dust,
Yeah. And that's really the problem, is so much of the equipment is it's just been overused. It's gone past its lifetime. They've only got so many hours worth of life, and they pushed them way exceeding that. Like, for instance, the Humvees. These things weren't designed to be up-armored vehicles. But in Iraq, with the IEDs, we had to make them up-armored. So we're adding 4,000 and 6,000 pounds of armor to a vehicle For one, the chassis is not designed for it. The engine's not
Yep.
designed for it. The transmission is not designed for it. But
Yeah.
we ran these things for 6 or 7 years with all of that. So yeah, you just wear these things out.
Man, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, we got to make some changes, like make sure we're ready here. Then that's, like you say, if China and Russia teamed up, that would be kind of the worst case scenario. So sounds like an awesome book. I'm really, really excited. I wish I had a little bit more read time.
Hey, no worries. It'll be out in audio hopefully by summer.
Nice. Awesome. Looking forward to that. Alrighty, James. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your information. I have a really exciting interview, and I definitely like the directions that you gave us as far as, trying to keep it more of a positive experience and using positive ways to let people's guard down instead of thinking about it so negatively.
Yep, no problems.
Alrighty. You take care.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, James, so much for coming on the show. Some really, really cool information on how, we can start just being a little bit smarter in how we communicate, and then things we could employ if it was an SHTF situation. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show, share that information with us. Everybody go check out James's stuff. He's doing a lot of really great work over there. I wish I had a little bit more read time available, but most of that's getting sucked up into right time right now, which is pretty exciting stuff. Once again, I want to thank you for listening to the show, and thank you for becoming a contributor over at patreon.com. That's www.patreon.com/changingearth. I really appreciate all you guys out there listening to the show. And remember, until next time, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sara for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, and Battle for the South at www.author.sarafhathaway.com. If you love Sara's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.